All right, I'm Kyle Early, and this is the Eternal Training Committee for the Cleveland Community Police Commission. I'm going to do the roll call. Greg Reeves,
Present.
James Chura, he's absent. Sharina Zaid, he is on the way.
Yes.
Okay, on the way. John Adams,
Present.
Alana Garrett Ferguson,
Present.
and I am Kyle Early. As we open up the meeting, we will now move into the selection of our committee chair and co-chairs. Is there a nomination on the floor, a recommendation on the floor?
I would like to present a motion to nominate Alana Garrett Ferguson and Kyle Early as co-chairs.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Do we accept?
No, any discussion?
Any discussion? Yeah, I was gonna get there, but wanted to make sure we accepted the position. Any discussion?
Not at this time. I think we can move forward with the agenda.
Okay, all right, so it is so. At this time, we will go into the introduction of the draft training outline, which will be led by Jason.
All right, good evening, everybody. In your orientation packet and also available to you tonight is what was recommended training for the commission. This was done by this office here, primarily by me with some input from the monitor, because when it comes to our training, it is a consent decree requirement that we have training that is substantial, that it is complete in its scope for what the work needs to be done, and quality. So we want to make sure that do our best to try and cover those bases. Ultimately, 115 gives you guys the authority over your own training, right? So this committee is important in establishing what you'll do on the front end, but also any other training requirements you see in the future. So how much training, for instance, you're going to require amongst yourselves each year, as kind of continuing education if you feel to go down that road. So you have two documents tonight. One is the recommended minimum hours outline that we presented to the city for feedback. And then also broken out of that is the specific response from the police on how they would like to do it. So I'll get to that second document a little bit later, and hopefully Delonte will be joining us from the law department because he was the point person for organizing that with the police. And I wasn't present for that, but it kind of mirrors, some of these are redundant. So it's broken into training blocks of different kind of topics. The biggest one are your general legal concepts. Obviously, there's quite a bit of legal knowledge that will be required that crosses over with your duties in 115. And the second biggest block, or actually the biggest block, is the Cleveland Division of Police learning what their procedures are, how they operate, all their internal functioning, that kind of stuff. So those are the two largest portions of it. The front end is your basic public official orientation. That was recommended in regards to anyone who's going into government work. I know some of you have had experience before, but it's taken from the standpoint of, people are starting from scratch because some people have never touched some of these topics before as well. And then there's the specific things to civilian oversight programs and best practices. So that goes into some of the things that you'll have to do in your capacity and gives you a little bit more training and skill set to do so. And there's also, options for continuing professional development to be filled in by you all as well. So starting with block one, some of these things we've already touched on a little bit, and I'm glad Delonte is joining us for this here. So it's good to know, a little bit more about the charter. Ethics and conflicts of interest is Delonte's area of expertise. So you have an in-house expert ready and willing to go on that. It's an important part of it. Some of the laws we talked about, and they will be incorporated into your rules. It looks like the rules committee is moving forward, and they're specifically mentioning, ethics and conflict of interest, things in the rules that you'll have to be trained upon. We already recognize the need for Ohio sunshine laws. There's been quite a bit of conversation surrounding that since we got started. And then budgeting and purchasing, once we get this budget, we'll go into more detail on how purchasing works at the city and what the rules are for budgetary oversight and control for the budget committee. So that's all important to know in the training for people who are going to be working in that area. Block 2 is specific to the police commission. So once the manual rules comes out, we'll look at what's in there and determine if we need to do a little bit more detail on some of those things. The content of Charter 115, I think we fairly well covered that, but the law department may have interest in just touching on a little bit more in detail, especially some of the things that may be in your enumerated powers. The CPC budget, we kind of already covered that in budget committee and orientation, so that one's kind of knocked out. Grant making, for those people who don't have grant experience, grant making is a big part of this. So there may be commissioners who can benefit from understanding the grant process, how that works, what the controls are. And then another part of it is, I know Delante's been working on this, so that's great. An overview of the oversight system. So CPRB and Office of Professional Standards are complementary organizations, and a little bit of knowledge on how those work and how you fit into that is part of the training. The general legal concepts here, consent decree, civil service rules, quality legal investigations, a due process, standards of proof, collective bargaining agreements. I think that's going to be something that comes up relatively frequently in your term. You also have to learn about garrity issues, which is related to employment and employment investigations when they cross over with criminal. General Fourth Amendment principles for policing, First Amendment in policing, civil torts, qualified immunity and sovereign immunity, Brady and Giglio law, application in Cuyahoga County, subpoenas, and conducting an oversight hearing. So those would be things where we look at to receive that training from qualified professionals in those areas, you know, primarily people with JDs. This is a heavy legal section. So that's the visioning there, is giving you enough legal knowledge to have a good footing when you address these issues on the job. The Cleveland Division of Police, there are, as I said, this is the biggest one. It basically covers all of the major GPOs in the consent decree and a little bit more. It doesn't cover everything the police do because their GPO book is enormous and you would have to go through the entire academy to really get that level of knowledge. But it does make sure that all the consent decree GPOs and the stuff that's covered in section 115 is in this training curriculum. And Delonte can explain how the police decide to break that down and what their suggestion is for how to deliver that training to you when we get to the end of that, which will be in a moment. So block 5 is civilian oversight programs and best practices. So some people are great at this because they do it often in their jobs. But if you look at some of the training standards that Nate Cole puts out, some of that is gathered from there, and some of it is from experience in this office on what we could be a little stronger on, and recommendations from the monitor as well. So goal setting and measurement, gathering data and analysis, bias, and then writing reports and telling stories in writing, relationships and community engagement and conflict management. And again, those are things that go back to NACO training recommendations, as well as some of your code of ethics stuff, and then just strengthen up some skills that will help this board in general. And then finally, the biggest continuing professional education every year is the NACO conference. That's the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. Delonte and I were down there with a few of the staff from this office last year. There's a lot of learning to be done there. And we are budgeted to send some commissioners and maybe some staff down there again this year. It happens in November, and this year it's in Chicago. So something to consider for this group, how they would go through the selection process for what commissioners would want to go to that if they wanted to go. But the sooner you have that conversation with the broader group, the better, because we can start planning logistics for that trip it does take several months of lead time to get travel. So I would say have that decision made by about 90 days before the conference minimum. So we're talking about if it's in November, maybe by August, if you guys can determine, who might be interested in going to that conference. So we have some time on that, but that's the general one. There are other conferences out there, but that's typically the one where you could really touch people in this area and get to know people who are doing this in other states and sometimes all over the world. There were some delegates from other countries there this year as well. All right, Delonte, you're up.
If I may, before we go to Delonte, quick question. I remember reading that the mayor had put out an RFP for a firm to come in and train the commission on our rules, our responsibilities and how to operate in this new role. Is that a part of this training or is that something totally different?
So I can speak to that. So the goal with the RFQ that we put out was to essentially look at other organizations. So the piece that Jason mentioned specifically about bringing in experts to be able to touch on things with relationships or with respect to general oversight and of law enforcement and kind of what that looks like from a broader scale, right? So I think we have a lot of the tools in-house, whether it's with the staff here, with CDP, with the law department, to be able to address more local things, but to give a broader perspective as to, what works, what are best practices, things like that. That's essentially what that RFQ was put out for. We actually didn't get responses to that RFQ. NACOL expressed interest, just didn't get it in time. Also, Cleveland State expressed interest as well. They ultimately just didn't have the resources to be able to put together what we were kind of looking for. And then this other organization called Polis, who actually already does some aspects of training with the Division of Police and some other factors. So they also reached out and expressed interest. But since then, we have had conversations with NACO directly to see about what we can do to provide that piece. So that's how that was intended to work together there. So I think what I can add is, let's see where to start. First, I'll talk about, what you have here from the Division of Police. And so one of the things that we reached out to the police department was for essentially input as to what the Division of Police felt like needed to be included in commissioner training. And so this is essentially what they put together in terms of what that should include. And so again, and I know I sent you guys this electronically a while back as well, kind of part of that onboarding package, but this is essentially what they're recommending is included in training. And so in follow-up conversations that we've had with them, they are more than amenable to be able to kind of plug in where we go. So I informed them of you guys' meeting schedule to be able to say, hey, they're meeting bi-weekly for 2 hours or 2.5 hours at a time, and we can, kind of plug in there. So they're fine with doing that, as opposed to kind of this detailed outline that looks like a 8 to 3:30 day every day. So it doesn't necessarily need to look like that. It can be broken up and split up. People are obviously able to schedule ride-alongs and tours and things like that on your own time rather than doing that as a group. So there's a lot of flexibility, there. And so I think this, a number of these things kind of coincides with some of the recommendations that you've already seen. So that's where that comes in. And so they're essentially ready to go with this. One of the things that we are working with them now, and this is kind of out of compliance with the consent decree, is the the monitor and the monitoring team for the consent decree wants to be able to provide feedback on training. And so, so what we're working with the Division of Police on now is essentially getting more of a granular breakdown of these pieces. So essentially, we can include, you know, kind of an overview of what each of these topics will include, you know, kind of who the presenters are, et cetera, provide that to the monitoring team to be able to get feedback on it, to the extent that it can be presented to the full commission. But essentially, though, substantively, these things are already ready to go and essentially just need to be plugged in on the commissioner's schedule. So that's with respect to that. Let's see, I answered the question about NACO. And yeah, and like I said, and then there's internal things, you know, that we can handle between the current staff and the law department and other administrative or other officials. You know, I think we've also, you know, like Jason touched on budget, we've also touched on, you know, contracting, legislation, like how some of those types of things work. That will be important as well. Yeah.
If you can you explain more about the piece with the monitoring team of what they're asking for? Because it was my assumption is they wanted more input from understanding training from the police aspect, but they also want more input into the commissioner's training as well. Is that
Correct. So, as we have been updating them on just what's going on with the CPC, the monitor has expressed, so the current interim monitor has expressed interest in what the training will look like for the commission specifically, and they explicitly asked for an opportunity to be able to give feedback on that. So they want to be able to see the training materials, what's essentially, you know, what's going to be presented to the commission, you know, who's going to do it, et cetera, and an opportunity to provide feedback. But yeah.
I just wanted to follow up a question. So I see that this would be very long days. But if possible, like say if we felt like we wanted the training, like something in the second day, we actually wanted it on the first day, something on the first day, we felt like we wanted to put it on the last day. Do we have the flexibility to move those things around if needed?
Generally, yes. So yes, Commander Magooth is the ranking officer who is over training and over the academy's training. And so yes, I explicitly asked that question that these sessions can be plugged in at different times. Now, I have not necessarily confirmed whether or not there was a specific rhyme or reason as to why they're in this order, because that could be the case, right? For them, it might be of some importance that it's in this order, but I don't know that offhand. But generally speaking, yes, things can be, you know, plugged in. So, for example, though, I imagine some things just kind of make sense, right? So I imagine you wouldn't go right into critical incidents and management before you talked about structure and kind of command hierarchy, right? That just might make sense to talk about the structure of the division before you start getting into specifics. So there's certain things like that that might just make sense, but other things I imagine shouldn't be an issue to plug and move.
Well, go ahead. If I may, there was so it's redundant in that second section. So just, they seem to have followed the order that we sent and suggested to a degree, and they cut something. So, sorry, that was just on my mind. I would lose it if I didn't pop that out.
No, and it looks like this training is just a one-day training.
Like this,
It says 20 hours on here, but
on the 4 days.
Each one of those is a day, so from 8 to 3:30.
That's a full day. Nope,
for
that.
5 days?
Now, yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I was slow, sorry.
It's a teacher.
So I have a question. How come they did cut certain things? So like looking at like community and problem oriented policing, that is something that has been raised several times, in the consent decree with the monitoring team. And so that is not listed on what they have given us. And then they put use of force, search and seizure. They left off de-escalation. I don't know if they did that just for space, or is there something else that, if they want to do search and seizure and use of force and not de-escalation, or did they just, like, was that intentional, I guess, leaving that off? And then also with the, community and problem-oriented policing, why was that left off?
So, couple things. One, I don't know what their starting point was, right? So I don't necessarily know if they were necessarily looking at something else and then
Okay.
explicitly decided to cut something,
Okay.
or whether or not they just independently re-looked at it and decided, hey, here are the things we want to include. Also unsure as to whether or not some of those things are included within what they have here, right? So maybe during this 3-hour use of force session, perhaps that includes de-escalation. So don't know a breakdown, but admittedly, that's one of the things that we're following up with them to be able to give to the monitoring team as kind of a breakdown of what these sessions will actually include, who's presenting these, right? What are the materials that might come with it, and what's kind of the learning objectives for each. So this is something that myself, along with Dr. Anderson, that you guys met on at orientation, is working on with respect to complying with the monitor's request. And that should have a little bit more information there. But to the specific question, again, I don't know if they were necessarily cutting things, or whether or not they just kind of came up with this independently.
Okay.
And it was sent to the division. They did not correspond with us afterwards, so they worked with the law department, not with us. So yes, I created it, I sent it to them. They didn't provide feedback to me, and they created this independent of working with us on it.
What was that turnaround time?
When I sent it to them,
Yeah, like, the timeline between you sending them this and then them creating it, like, what was that timeline?
months. Months, yeah. So this was sent to them long ago, and then Delonte was the point person for working on some training. So what they did with it in that time period, I don't know, because they never got a response back from the police to this office. But Delonte did have conversations with them, and Delonte had a copy of this as well. So
Yeah, I reached out to the division probably around October, right as the mayor's nominations were coming out, to give a heads up that, hey, we want the division's input in as it relates to training. I circled back to that conversation in December once we knew that the confirmations were going to happen. And then they turned this around and said, okay, hey, we've actually been working on this. This is what we're proposing that the commissioner's training to include. So again, don't know if it's based on this or if they, or what they did with this. Can't tell you. But this is what they came up with when I asked them to produce
Gotcha.
something.
And it's okay to assume that you created this training based on what you know that we would need as far as working with commissioners in the past, but also in alignment with the consent decree and the monitoring team, right? Okay.
that is correct, just to put it out there, because a thumbs up, probably people couldn't see that, but yes, it is. And it did have feedback from the interim monitor, so, and it was positive feedback about including each one of those topics.
A couple quick things I want to ask. One, if there's something missing that we want to add, like de-escalation, say it wasn't part of that 3-hour training, can we request that? We're allowed to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
And two, like, block 6, it says recommended hours 8 years. Is that a typo?
I think the thought was over the time of your prospective terms, right? So like going.
Right.
Yeah, I
So,
think
like,
that's
going to
definitely
the-
a typo. I apologize.
But going to the NICO conference, right, is something that you would probably do annually.
Even though I figured it was a typo, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is over the term of, like you just explained.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Okay, and lastly, I want to ask real quick, how long is this conference in NICO? Is that how you pronounce it? How long is that in Chicago?
So about, what, 4 or 5 days?
You would go down on a Sunday and return on a Thursday. So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's later this year, right?
Yeah, it's in November.
We would have CPC up.
And it's great to have commissioners, but we understand that, full-time commitments make that hard. You have to use your own vacation to go, get learning on your second job. So it's recommended that at least one or two, try to go, if you can make it work, but we always understood. And definitely staff will represent you if you cannot, make it. It's important that NACOL knows. And also just a point, in the future, you will select a voting member. We are members of NACOL, so you will select someone from this commission to be a voting member in that organization in the future.
2 additional points. So in addition to the physical or in-person conference, NACOL also does a version of the conference virtually as well. So they'll do, I think this past year, what they did was 3 separate sessions that happened on respective days. So I think there was one in September, one in October, one in November that kind of covered generally. Obviously it wasn't as in-depth as what you're going to get live and in person at the conference, but it covered some of the same topics and material. So there are other ways to be able to engage, and that's also one of the reasons why we put out the RFQ as well, to try to facilitate, being able to come in to you guys as well.
And just another point, it wasn't in here, but NOBLE, which is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Officers, I think it is. I might have that a little mixed up how their acronym spells out exactly. Their conference is actually in Cleveland this year. And they have preliminarily reached out to us, to Shelley, and I'll get an update on how much involvement we might be able to have. But that is local. It'll still be during the week because most conferences are during the week, but there may be some opportunities in there to learn how law enforcement presents, especially, from the perspective of Black and brown officers and minority officers.
Just a question about the training. When we look at the different blocks of training and the recommended hours being 40 to 60, how did the other commission lay out their training schedule? Do we have an example of that as we try to kind of nail down what our training schedule will be for our commission?
Yeah, the other commission, they didn't have as structured of a training requirement because training is mandated in the law now. So that's why it's more structured. So before that, they didn't have to go through this as intensely as you did. Most of their training was done during meetings or through people in-house who had that experience. So we had several, Fourth Amendment attorneys, for example, on the group who would do, specifically train on those issues. And I will make that point too. We have a lot of people who have reached out and said that they will donate time on these issues. So you met Commissioner Katz. There's also Commissioner Gordon Freeman, both with years of experience who teach at law schools, these exact topics. They're willing to come back and get you through some of these in these training blocks. We also had the county defender, Sweeney, who offered some time, and also someone over at CSU Law who's worked in some of our groups offered time. So we have a lot of expertise willing to come and donate their time to help you all get off to a good start. So we would just, when you consider this tonight, lead time is important. So the more we can get scheduled, the better. But like if you wanted to do, I've heard discussions that you're considering an 8-hour training day on like a Saturday. To fill that, Delonte and I would need some time, some lead time on that, probably at least like maybe 30 days to get instructors to make sure we're covering all the topics. So we couldn't just say in 2 weeks we need an 8-hour day because that would be hard to get the people we need to facilitate that going. The other alternative is we discussed at every meeting cutting out a block for some of this stuff, right? So maybe a 1-hour block at every public meeting, and you have a lot coming up. So I think you made a commitment to meet twice a month going through at least the first 6 months. If you did an hour at each one of those, and we plan that out, you would knock a lot of this out and you already have those meetings scheduled and committed. So it's another suggested way we might be able to.
So, on that point, I would like to ask the other commissioners, I mean, it's a lot of time. Uh, we need the training. I think we all agree that I think the challenge is, the time commitment, for us. Um, I was wondering, just thinking about what you were saying. Like, for example, if the police come, like, I'm just wondering, are there ways to sort of also streamline some of the training? So for example, the budgeting committee. Could the CPD maybe come to the budgeting committee? Maybe present to the budgeting committee, we report out to the, I don't know how people feel about it. I'm just throwing out suggestions for, it's a lot, like I was adding the numbers, like over 40 hours of training. So I'm just trying to, like, maybe the budget may not be the thing that we might want to streamline through a committee, but I don't know, maybe we can keep our eyes out for things that maybe could go through some of the committees and then I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not saying that's what I want to do. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing out suggestions to try to, it's a lot of hours and I don't know if everything needs to be full commission because I mean, I think that's part of the role of committees. Just an idea.
One of the questions I was gonna ask was how far out can we plan this? Because I'm thinking the 8-hour sessions might be best, just so we can knock a lot out. Like, can we just do one 8-hour session a month and then like every meeting a block to have training as well, so we can try to knock it out as soon as possible. And then my other question was like, let's say if, like he said, like if there's something maybe that was covered, but maybe I want additional training and something, do we have to be trained as a group? Like if I wanted additional training, could I just reach out to someone and get,
So I would encourage, that you guys let the other commissioners know when you go back and report out that there is training money available for people who want to pursue a little more expertise in any specific topic. So if you were to see a conference you want to go to or a class that will enhance, you would just have to bring back to the board, request, that. Typically the way that it's happened in the past, and you could set a threshold, like you guys could say, if it's over $1,000, you have to ask permission. If it's under, and it's already in our budget and it hasn't been used, and you're not using it excessively, like if one commissioner burns through the whole training thing, right? Then you could set a threshold and say, all you have to do is just reach out to staff and they'll set you up with it, right? So that's up to you guys too, but I would encourage, there is the ability there and some budget to enhance this for individual people who want to go deeper into topics.
Also, please do not hate me, but I see a few things missing that I want to add, if that's okay. So and I know it's because they're probably not a part of the collective bargaining agreement, but I would like for us to at least have an opportunity to hear from Black Shield and HAPA, I think is how it's pronounced, which is the Hispanic Police Association, and Black Shield is the Black Police Association. So I would like those groups to be added. Like, I know they're probably not a part of the collective bargaining agreement, so maybe that's why they were not on here, but I definitely would want to hear from them. The next thing would be is media. So one of the things, actually another commissioner even brought up that we should talk about in this committee is, since we're always being asked to talk to the media, us even making what, if we want to have media training, us deciding that, but also just us to have some type of protocol in place for the whole commission in regards. So I think the way the bylaws are is like the chair is the person who can speak at all times, but like if there's a communication system that we internally set up that, hey, so-and-so has reached out to me, do we send an email to all commissioners if it's about this particular topic, like having parameters around that, because we don't want any discrepancies of like, maybe one person thinks they're speaking for them, but then it comes out that it's like a statement from the whole commission and that's not. So even us as a committee deciding if we want to put and that would be getting media trained, or just us as a committee deciding whether or not and how we want to move forward with the rest of the commission parameters around dealing with the media. And then the last one I would add would be around transformative and restorative justice. I think when a lot of us was going through like our hearings and some of us were talking a few of us on the commission I know have an interest and might have an expertise in that already, and have talked about like those are been some of the reasons why they even wanted to be on the commission. So if everybody has that baseline of what those two things are, especially since those are two models that a lot of police departments, a lot of activists around the country have said that should be instituted in community policing, it's transformative and restorative justice, especially as a safety model. So it'd be great if like that also could be added in, and I don't know if that can be done through a webinar or online, because I know there's plenty of groups who do online webinars and those things, or having someone come in and talk to us about it, and it might not add any expense of like in-person training, but just having that included in the training schedule, I think is important. Those four things.
Maybe that was on block 5.
Which one? Because I know I said a lot.
Maybe
So which one?
like civilian oversight programs, best practices.
Okay.
Section.
Do you guys think that that would be a good one to put there? What do you guys feel about media and us hearing from the Hispanic and Black Shield?
Oh, before I say it, I want to ask a question about that. Like, okay, so here it has, instructor confirmed, yes or no, and it's a lot of blank spaces. Can we submit who we like? You know, like Black Shield, or, you know what I'm saying? Can we put them in there and request that they do particular trainings?
I think it's in your purview to request a trainer that you feel qualified and fit, yes. You know, as long as you have a process for, justifying why that person. And so the one thing about it is if you want them to be compensated, there are a different set of rules. So we can't just pick, whoever we like, then certain things we have to put out for competitive fair bidding process over certain amounts of money. So if we are talking about paying people, and some of these we may need to pay instructors, we do have to put that out, and there's a process and a timeline for that. So
Well, we do have the power to reach out to these organizations to see if they would be willing to do the training.
absolutely, and staff would be willing to work with you on that if you have people in mind, that, of course.
So I wanted to go back to part of your question, and it's the basis of, just for clarity, all of us as commissioners have to have this number of hours of training by law, correct?
Not that number of hours. You do need to have, the higher bar is the consent decree than the law. So the law says, you have to set up training and establish training for yourselves, right? The consent decree, it mandates that training has to be sufficient in scope and meet the areas of the consent decree that you're dealing with to be in compliance. So the consent decree makes it a little more complicated than it normally would have to be just under the law. Delonte, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I would just add that the hours themselves can be flexible, right? And so, there may be things where, maybe we don't need a full 2 hours for, maybe we don't need a full hour for, maybe 30 minutes is sufficient. So that piece can be, that can be played around with.
So then the next part of that question then is, example could be, we have an 8-hour training. Some people can't make it. Are we allowed to record those trainings? And then are they allowed to go through those trainings virtually or in the office so it can be tracked in terms of their hours so that we can continue on with the blocks of training that we got to get through?
I would say there is some ability to be flexible here. So one of the things we can discuss with the police maybe is they have an online learning system. So there may be a possibility, I can't make a commitment to it, that some of these GPOs that are in here, the general police orders, if they already have a training set up in that, we may be able to do some limited exposure to the police stuff through their system if they're agreeable to that. There's not one for the city right now, unfortunately. I think maybe later this year there will be. So next year we might be able to do continuing education using the citywide system. But unfortunately, right now our only ability for that is with the police. Now, other online training, again, if it meets the standard and it's quality, right? If we see something out there that's developed online that would fit one of these through an institution or an organization or whatever, we should certainly consider it. The recording part, yes. There was one interesting thing that came up. It's the idea now of doing it as a large group that the law director has made it clear that if we have a quorum at this training, it has to be open to the public. So that is another part that I don't think the police have considered in their master training plan here, is that, if they wanted to do those 8-hour days and they wanted all commissioners to be there, or if we did a Saturday and it was all commissioners to be there, we would have to do it, like we did our orientation, you know, with the cameras there and the ability for the public to sit in on that training. So,
Thank you.
I think it seems that we have a lot of discussion, like a lot of decisions and things. I think for a sake of like time and maybe just us moving forward, I like your idea of like, does any of us right now, as we're looking at that, can we go through and maybe decide if there is a person, a group, or organization that we think may be good for a certain part of this, and then like move forward from there?
I think the two that you mentioned have to be somewhere in here.
Okay.
I've heard of what did you say, Alpha?
Yeah.
I've heard them, but I'm not really familiar with them. Black Shield, most of them, DJ. But I think they have to be a part of this somehow, somewhere. Now, I would have to go back through this list.
But that's what I'm saying, right now, you wanna take some time and we can go through and see who we would propose from what organization or what, and kind of talk about it. If we think, we can look at it at that time now and if we want to.
I would even like if they could do it together. So he's right, both organizations. I don't know if that's possible.
if I might make a suggestion also, if you can prioritize what you think might come first. So that way, the things that you would like to, you think are important as a group, that maybe we can, you know, that way Delonte and I have a roadmap, when we leave of, you know, if we are gonna go down that in putting it into agendas.
To that point, I've just been jotting down some notes, so I just wrote down like maybe some items as a committee that we might want to think about. Just to, there's like pages and pages and pages of categories and categories and categories of training, but I was thinking one, like basically what are our training priorities? Like what are the things that we feel like we need to know, like what do we need to know now to continue our progress and moving forward? To Alana's point, do we want to prioritize media training? I do get a sense that there's some hesitance right now. We want to make sure that we are handling ourselves properly in the media. And we do have a obligation to the public, to be available, but I do understand why some commissioners might be hesitant without some sort of guidance or training. So do we want to prioritize the media training? 3, are there meetings, so to your point, Alana and Greg, maybe we can go through some of these and decide maybe one of those or a couple of those we want to make sure we prioritize for those Wednesday meetings that we have every other week. So we might want to see
Or
if there's.
for the next 30 days.
Yeah, and then lastly, we probably would want to make sure that we can try to find a Saturday, Sunday for March, April, May.
Okay.
And then like put that on you guys are chairs, so then you would take the lead on finding
Okay.
that those once a month that would work for us. That would be my suggestions.
All good suggestions. In terms of the order, I'm kind of looking at this as it's kind of me that put in place in terms of priority for me. When we look at the new public orientation, all of these things matter in terms of us running meetings. Some of it I think we've covered already in our first training. So we're kind of, and as a matter of fact, does that first training count toward this first block? For clarity, okay, okay. The answer was yes, good people, for those watching. Also, when we start looking at the Community Police Commission and what that means for us, some of that we've already covered as well in the first training. And so if we can begin to look at knocking those out, I mean, because we spent 3 hours together in the first training already, which covered some of this as is, then I think we've kind of gotten the first 2 blocks. Say it again.
I was 5 hours.
Oh, yeah, 5 hours. Yeah, 5 hours. Yeah, sorry. But I guess you get my drift. We were here, so some of this we covered, and I think these are the first two blocks that we can knock out immediately because we've already got some hours in that, and that's open discussion as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you, the goal for you guys, excuse me, I think the goal for you guys essentially is, so to Kyle's point, kind of withdrawing what we've already covered, because yes, there's absolutely things in here that we've already covered. And then essentially, combining these two things, right, and kind of coming up with just one or cohesive outline of what, and I think you also hit it on the head that, the way that this presents is really already in a order that makes the most sense. Granted, there may be a couple of things here or there that you want to switch around, or you may, maybe want to move certain blocks around, but a lot of it is there, so I don't think you need to do too much with it unless there are specific things, right? But essentially, it's just compiling all of this and coming up with one document of topics, right? And then I think from the topics, again, we can work together. We can figure out where we can plug in the speakers and presenters for those specific topics, right? I think the first piece is identifying the topics, right? Which I think most of it has been there with the addition of the couple that Alana brought to the table, right? So sliding those in, and then, like I said, we plug in from there. So we see if there's other community outlets that can come in. We revisit the conversation with NACO. Again, they've reached out, right? And I've had that conversation with them that they're like, hey, we can figure out how to make something happen. So we can figure out what topics, they may be able to come in on. And that might be the day that is, good for one of those 8-hour days, right? Where, especially if they're coming into town or however they're going to facilitate it. So there's things like that. So essentially is you have the topics and just pretty much putting things on the calendar from there. And you guys already have most of the calendar together. So by using your biweekly meetings and same thing, I mentioned the same thing at orientation is I would definitely recommend trying to do, at least an 8-hour day, once a month or once every 6 weeks or some type of interval to be able to knock out a bigger chunk of it so that within 6 months, hopefully you've covered, most of these things.
A question for, I agree with you, Kyle, and then I'm looking at this, a lot of CDP stuff says already can be developed as an online learning. How soon will you know, or you can give us these online trainings that we can start knocking those out?
So with respect to, which piece are you looking at?
So in this one, the one that Jason created, he had under block 4, because outside of the first 3 things, we need to know how the cliques work, because that's why we're here. So I would prioritize that. But for at least 5 of these, it's listed that they can be developed as online, that we don't even need a whole 8-hour day. So how soon can we get these trainings as labeled as online? How soon can that be given? So that like tomorrow when we do the full commission as a training committee, we can say, hey, we picked out these dates in March and April. These 5 things that you see here, these are all going to be online trainings available as of March 1st. Take extra leisure. Please try to get it done before such and such. Like, because it already says that. So these things don't have to be part of the 8-hour training because it says that it can be online.
So I will circle back to the academy because again, I want to preface that cannot say for certain that CDP even looked at this, let alone used it, right?
So it's a problem if they haven't.
So I guess my point is that, cannot say today whether or not it is in fact true that they can, or what it would take for them to put things online. Now, granted, it'd probably be, so for example, I've done through their learning management system for their staff, learning management pieces where they would need to probably set up something with TP20 which is our public access network, to be able to, record something and then put it up there. And maybe they already have it up there. Like maybe there are things that they already have, right? Because I know there are things that they do already have online. So
Okay.
what I will do is I'll go back to the team or to the academy staff and see what pieces of this are already online.
Okay.
So, and then you can also tell me now as well, so the pieces that we want to add, because I want to be clear too, like for, at least for the starting point for the CDP pieces, I want to at least start from here because this is what they've already created, right? So if there's things we want to add to it, right, if we think there's things that are missing, then we can say, hey, cool with these, or if there's things that you don't want to do from here or whatever the case may be, right, that I can go to them and say, hey, based on the training that you guys presented, the commission wants to add these couple things. And then once you have the full scope, tell us what all is already available online, what things, what if things need to be done in person. And I could certainly bring that information back to this committee.
And to that point, what you're saying the holdup has been getting those resources from them. It's just them not looking at this document.
No hold up there. So the only hold up at this point, so from their perspective, this is ready to go and is ready to be plugged in on it. They just looking for dates.
Understood. But to Alana's point for the online materials, is there an issue with getting that in terms of so that we can move forward? That's, I think, the clear thing we're trying to get.
And
Yeah,
So
like,
right,
we look
and
at this first day of stuff. Oh, if we look at this first day of stuff, especially all the stuff from 1,300 hours to 1,530, to 1,500 hours, it's the same exact stuff that's under block 4. That's all listed, can be developed, can be done as online learning, and they're only half an hour blocks for each of those. And so it's like, why have us all in person? If we can look at the budget and hiring structure online, that would make more sense. And we would have more questions. So that's
Right.
And that was my,
So
that was
I-
my suggestion, because I created that, so it doesn't mean that they have anything online already, but those were things that I saw as reasonable as can be quick learnings online.
Right.
Here's the structure, here's what a sergeant is, here's, what a commander is, here's the budget. Like, those things can be in a classroom, but they'll take up a lot of time, and so I think it's doable. I think I'll Delonte and I can go to Commander Maguth and say, if they're not available now, how quickly can we do it? And I think it's reasonable to use the learning management system if they're agreeable to it, because I'm sure I know I've seen them draft things in there relatively quickly, so it won't be hard. So I think we just have to first get them to agree that it saves everyone time, energy, and money to do it that way.
I mean, because it doesn't.
No, go ahead. No, I'm just gonna say, honestly, I can't imagine that these first 5 things in block 4 aren't already online. I mean, you're talking about the structure of the police. That common knowledge should, not common knowledge, but you know what I mean. These things should easily already be online. We just need to know where to access. And I'm not saying it is. I'm just, hard to believe to me that it's not. I'm just saying.
my thing is.
And they do have de-escalation on here along with, use of force.
Where?
Block 4 after,
That's not what they presented. What they presented was this.
Yeah.
oh yeah, and that's just like the schedule.
That's what
No.
Jason presented to them. This is what
Oh.
they presented to
And to them, de-escalation is use of force, so most likely it's in there. That one is de-escalation is part of their master use of force policy, so it probably is when they envision that. I'm sure they would talk about de-escalation.
But just if we're talking about getting together 8 hours, I don't want to have the full commission for 8 hours learning about hiring, structure, and I don't, that's a waste of time. I think that the commission would want to, for 8 hours, talk about use of force, search and seizure, investigation, crisis intervention. I think those are the things that we will want to know. And included in that is even stuff of diversity. Because I think we should know about the diversity stuff from the very first day. Like, we should meet when they're doing their welcoming. We can meet people from Black Shield or the Hispanic organization. Like that, those are the things I would think need to be
Right.
monumental. Like,
I mean, I agree with you. I think because we're still actually going to be doing the training. We just will be getting some of it from home. I think if with your approach, we can probably get this whole first day done for lunch.
Yeah.
Because what we will be doing is, I know I speak for myself, but I'm gonna take notes. I'm gonna have questions as I'm going through whatever the online trainings are. And I think that would be more productive for us to come in with questions to be answered. And it could be structured that way. And then maybe if we did do something like that, to your point, Alana, we could then maybe take the second day, the use of force and search and seizure, and then maybe that becomes what we do after lunch.
And I would say, look at the legal block too, because before you get trained in use of force and search and seizure, you want to have that Fourth Amendment stuff under your belt. That's why I put the legal block before the police block in your training stuff, because a lot of their policy will deal with constitutional issues. So it'll help for you guys to have that constitutional education before you move to learning about their policies. So
Can we start looking at who we would want to do these? Because for the legal blocks, I would ask some of the people that you had mentioned at the Cleveland School, CSU School of Law and Case School of Law. Do you know, like, can you tell us, like, offhand, some of the folks? Some of the folks who would want to do that for us?
yes, as you met Lou Katz, we also have Gordon Friedman, both instructors, one at Case and one at CSU. And then Jonathan Whitmer Rich also mentioned he would be interested in possibly helping, and he is a co-dean over there, I believe. I don't remember the exact terminology of what assistant dean. Yeah, and then we also have, we have a whole cadre of assistant directors of law, prosecutors over there, and then public defenders who would be willing to help as well with some of these issues. So I think if you wanted to do an 8-hour day, I think the legal block would be a good thing to target for an 8-hour day, because you can knock that out.
Instead of trying to move the pregnancy here.
This would still be the same 4 days, but before we did that second block, we would do the legal block.
The legal stuff, and we did that and condensed it, maybe the legal block to the first day.
No. So the legal block is not on this at all. So what we're saying is if right now we were gonna schedule 2 8-hour days. Yeah.
And for the record, too, I just add this, this is not necessarily what we have to do. This was recommended by.
Exactly.
Correct?
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, I just wanted to be clear, because it seems like that's where we're getting confused at. So if this is what Jason has created, and it also includes online and everything else that we're talking about, maybe we should work from just this document and add into the blocks what we want them to cover, instead of trying to adopt this into this. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Because this is a CPC recommended
This is
block
This is
schedule,
there. Okay.
and this is there. And this is not to be adversarial, it's just that we're starting to see where things in here can fit into here.
right.
That makes sense. Okay.
I do also just to put it out there, I do want us to, have some type of interaction face to face with them sooner rather than later. Not to prioritize meeting with them first, but it'd be nice to, at least start the conversation with them.
I agree.
And a good way to do that is we can, in one of your upcoming meetings, we can invite the command staff, the chief, the assistant chief, to come and talk to you, and you can ask them questions at one of your upcoming public meetings. That's a good way to do it. We would just have to, put some dates out there, and then they would get back to us with who they want to bring, and that's typically how we've done it in the past, is when you do that first introduction, it's at a public meeting, and they come in and just say hello, and you have a moment to ask them questions.
Do you want to have asked if they can come to the February 22nd meeting? And we can, yeah,
We probably should make a motion before we leave.
yeah, before we leave,
Yeah.
but that's just a date. We do it, so.
So then, in terms of agenda then and time,
Yes.
I'd like to start our meeting on time and end on time. But I know we'll be here just a little bit longer today. It's our first one. If we all agree, can we move into the next area, which is new business, and start discussing the training outline? Is that fine with everyone?
Can I make a suggestion, Chair? It's just a teacher in me and how this works. I'm gonna suggest that one, and we don't have to complete it today, but perhaps we should create like a training checklist. Like you said, there are things that we've already done. It might be nice to put all of this into some type of form where we can kind of check off, you know, the date that we did it, that it was completed, and then maybe a goal could be whatever the next training is going to be. Maybe we can just plan out like the first full day, because trying to do like we can only do one thing one day at a time anyway. If we can get maybe a couple days, maybe, but maybe if we can do like a solid day of like what one day of a block of training would be, that might be a goal.
For clarity, I wasn't trying to do all 6 blocks today.
Oh no, I didn't get that impression.
Yeah, I was just trying to plan one block. And what, to your point, while we have Jason here, look at what we covered in the first training to count those hours as well. And I definitely agree with you that as co-chairs, we can work with Jason to create a checklist so that when we come before the full commission, we can always say this is what we've accomplished so far. So with that being said, then let's move into, based upon section 1, Jason and Delonte, kind of what have we covered already? Look at, for instance, I believe in the first meeting that we had, we talked about sunshine laws, right? We talked about the city charter in 115. So let's kind of go through what we have covered so that we don't have to cover it again. And if by law and charter, we got to go through it again, then that's fine. But let's kind of eliminate what we have to.
So Delonte is the expert on ethics and sunshine laws, so if he feels we've met the threshold for that, that is something I'll defer to him on those 2 topics.
Unequivocally, no. I would say that absolutely still need to do a full ethics session, right? There are laws that apply to you as public employees, or excuse me, public officials. And then also, I mean, I talked very, very high level when it comes to sunshine laws. And so I highly recommend that essentially those are the first 2 things kind of on the agenda. We talked overview, right? So when we talk about just kind of overview, you met the safety director, those types of things. We talked about the content of 115. So that's probably, something that we've met. But yes, I can't stress enough though, the ethics and the sunshine law piece, for a couple different reasons. It's actually a slightly frenzy actually that, the number of meetings that are already happening when you don't yet have a full or haven't, I guess, have a full grasp of the standard that you're being held to, right? I mean, continuing to have meetings when you haven't been trained on what's considered a public record, what communications you're having are considered public record, right? We're having meetings without a full discussion about the Open Meetings Act. I recommend that's first on the agenda. And to that end, that's something that one of the things that I was going to propose to the commission. I've mentioned this to Jason and also to Pete, since he's chair pro tem for this coming Wednesday meeting, was that we knock that out then, while you're all together, and I know, at least based on the first conversation. So, and I'll kind of talk about this in 2 different pieces. So based on kind of the orientation meeting, when you guys had decided that the meeting block would be 2.5 hours, you do like 30 minutes of public comment, business, or what have you, and then feel time for substantive training content. So the thought that the thought that we came up with was to do the hour on ethics, to do the hour on sunshine laws. I already have a presentation ready to go and prepared for you for that I can deliver on Wednesday. Also, Amy Huff, Assistant Director of Law, and our Public Records Chair also already has a presentation ready to go and can also deliver that on Wednesday as well. But then I also learned on Friday that I guess there might be conversation about having a more extensive community conversation for this coming meeting. So I'm not quite sure exactly where, what the agenda or finalized agenda will be for tomorrow. But that was my recommendation and proposal. And I will say too, that again, I think the concern is I don't want you to continue to have meetings and continuing to conduct business before you understand the standard that are just being applied to you so before you can get into commission business, just by virtue of existing as a public official, there's a laundry list of things that now apply to you, is that I want you to be mindful of.
So Dante, I have a question because I thought these were online that we just went on the website and take. Are you talking something different?
So I'm talking something different. So the ethics piece is something that at least, so actually for both of these are something that, I think should be delivered in person. So I know I sent you guys information about the Ohio Sunshine Laws and when certain trainings work, because I think that it's good information to be able to watch and to be able to get a good understanding. But at the same time, excuse me, I was providing that as a reference, not necessarily saying, hey, do this, right? For two reasons. One, there are Ohio Sunshine Laws, and then there are Cleveland specific laws, right? And certain things that actually conflict and potentially even override some state things. So one of the things that the state law does with respect to sunshine laws is, or specifically like Open Meetings Act, for example, is it gives deference to chartered municipalities, right? So it says, hey, if you're in a municipality that has a charter that actually has provisions with respect to open meetings, then that prevails when there's a conflict with the Ohio law, right? So you need a more specific information with respect to the city law. And also too, again, all of this is new, right? And so I also want you guys to have an opportunity to be able to ask questions and to get clarity on things. And that becomes the difficulty when you're just watching a video. So yes, there is a general ethics law presentation that I could send you to that the state provides that will be a good overview. But it won't answer your specific questions. It won't consider the things that I know that you're likely to deal with and I can address, directly and in person. So that's why those are things that, that I would recommend be delivered in person.
So to go back for clarity, you did say that overview and content of Charter 115 could be something that was considered as training in the first session we had. Great.
Yes.
So we have officially 2 hours of training. Just want to clear that.
So,
Saying overview.
Overview.
so the first block,
The first block overview could be considered, and then block 2, number 1, content of Charter 115.
and so based on what,
Sorry.
just based on what Dante just said, can we make a motion? Since you already have at least one of those trainings set up, that we do at least one of these trainings, 1 hour training of tomorrow's meeting on that?
I do support the motion. The challenge is who is the chair and who is putting the agenda together.
So I think if we have to email it to him tonight and let him know that as a committee, our business, we are pretty much.
I can tell you what's on the agenda so far, and because Pete did ask, he thinks it's ready to go out. So Pete and I did discuss, I think everyone here was at the church last night at the Word, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a,
Oh,
sure, okay, so, because of Memphis, I think we're gonna have a lot of people who wanna speak their emotion. So I know that we had discussed having a minimum of a half hour. I suggested to Pete that we extend that for two reasons for this meeting. Because it's your first engagement with the public, so people have been waiting a year to just talk to you about stuff, right? So we're gonna get a lot of people lining up at that mic because it's your first experience with the public. And because Memphis is so fresh on everybody's mind, so a lot of people want to talk about that trauma they're feeling and their things they're feeling right now. So Pete agreed, and originally I said, let's extend it an hour. He took it back to 45 minutes, but that is the bulk of that, time and I think you may need it. Now, it might fall short, but I really think that's logical at this point. Then, our host, Councilman Joe Jones, has 10 minutes because he's been the only supporter and, and it's been a courtesy, when we're in someone's backyard to just let them say, hello and do that. And then we move to, CPC business, which is 7 to 8:30. So where the business is, the committees are going to each do a report. I think that the budget committee is ready to call for a vote that evening, but the other committees, I don't think we're at anything yet where there'll be a vote or a discussion needed. It'll just be a report out. So there may be some time flexibility in there. You can talk to Pete if you think you can knock it out. An hour might mean you're staying a little later than 8:30 if you choose to do that. And with the rec centers, the one thing I'll say is we don't have a lot of flexibility to stay super late because they have to pay employees to be there. And they when we hit that time, they got to get out. So,
Is one of the items ethics or the sunshine law? Is that on the agenda for tomorrow, one of them?
it hasn't been yet. No, there is no training on the agenda as of yet.
So maybe, go ahead, Sharina.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, maybe we could just put that for the next meeting, since this one is gonna be focused on engagement and connecting with the community.
Now,
Can we make a motion to put one of these ones?
that was gonna be my suggestion so I was gonna defer to Delante's expertise and ask him if we can only do one tomorrow, because I do agree with you all. We're not gonna put one of these
Focus on community engagement tomorrow.
Right.
for the whole,
The other challenge too, I mean, again, because as we're navigating through these new meetings, right? You're right, Jason, people are gonna wanna talk.
Right.
It's gonna be difficult to come out of the discussion of Memphis and then go into a training.
Right.
For many different reasons,
Right.
and how that looks. Right.
So two, couple thoughts, and I hear that too, and I think, the suggestion, if you were to have put training on there, the suggestion would have been to do that first.
Right.
So that you can get into the other things. But let me just throw this caution out there as well, and just something to think about. Don't know how strongly, I would feel, but I at least want to put it out there because it's a thought that when you engage in community conversation, which is absolutely critical and you absolutely need to do it. The concern that I have, the concern that I have is, as you're still, the commission as a whole, right? You're generally, you understand the power and authority that comes with this, but you're still developing how you're going to use that power and authority. And so the concern that I would have is as you engage with the community and as the community comes with their expectations of what they want to see, right? You won't necessarily, or you may not necessarily have know how to curb that expectation, right? Because you're still figuring out a lot of your policies and processes and those types of things. And so what I would hate to see is community leave tomorrow's meeting with an expectation of what you're going to do that you may not deliver on because you haven't decided.
So it's a listening session, just to be clear. So Pete and I had this discussion. The previous commission, we learned some hard lessons about back and forth and engaging. So it's mostly about letting people come up to the microphone. Our past standing practice with these things has been to do more listening than talking. LaToya Logan was great at that. she would say at the beginning, we're here to listen, we're taking notes, but most likely we're not going to respond to you this evening with any answers, right? So you say, we want to hear what you have to say. And then because some commissioners have really gotten themselves in trouble, wanting to respond immediately to that and just shooting from emotion, right? So I kind of went over that with Pete and he was like, okay, he'll give it his best shot. So most likely we won't be in a dialogue. It'll mostly just be about listening. And if there is something we need to respond to, we typically do it. We tell people we will respond to those things that were questions once we do the research or whatever we need to do, and we'll get back to you with a solid answer. We take their information and we either touch them personally or on the website or another way afterwards. So just because I get it, it's a pitfall. Delonte's 100% right. It's not meant to be a dialogue.
Yeah, I think that piece definitely makes sense too. Even with complete silence, I think you still run the risk, right? If the community all comes out together and says, this is what we expecting y'all to do, whether you respond or not, the community leaves there feeling like, hey, we all said this is what we want our community police commission to do, and we better see it done. And so I just something to think about.
Go ahead, please.
Just something to note, because Adriana did reach out to me about it. We are the only group that has not made a statement in regards to Memphis. So even when we're listening tomorrow, she asked me to draft something and write it and give it to you guys at the meeting tomorrow. I'll try to get it to you before. They might be expecting us to say a couple things in response because we are the only entity in Cleveland that has not made a statement. So this community civilian review board has made one, the police department. So that is just another thing of we're listening, but also we have not made a statement.
Adriana also reached out to me and asked me to post something. And I told her, I'm not comfortable doing it yet because I don't have an answer. First of all, this isn't Memphis and we want to ensure that that doesn't happen here. And that's really all I can actually say to that issue is we're going to do everything in our power that Memphis doesn't happen here. Other than that, I can't make another comment. Any other comment I make is going to be out of emotion. That's the most horrific thing I've ever seen. I can't do this. But we don't know enough yet. I don't know what kind of statement we could make at this point. We're so.
Well, I would say whoever's gonna handle communication, that would be their job and responsibility. And then we just agree on the statement as well and make any edits. Two things to consider too. Did you want to say something?
No, I was just gonna say maybe, Alana or Adriana could work with the staff person to create that statement.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I will offer my expertise and skills in this. I have a historical background and I'm an excellent writer. It's a tricky thing. This is not Memphis, but this is America. And as was said last night by the pastor from Antioch, Memphis is a black city, just like Cleveland's a black city. So there's more similarities between Memphis and Cleveland than we think. And don't want to overstep and jump out too quick, but this is why we're on the commission. This is why we applied. This is what we said we were going to do. Unfortunately, this happened before we got fully trained. But we have still been sworn in. And so I do think we need to make a strong statement.
We'll take one more comment on this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I trust you, John, and I'll support you in that. Go at it.
Yeah. Because I want to keep us
Yeah,
on track with the agenda that we have. Again, that's a communication thing that you all can work out with Jason in terms of forming a statement and go from there. And the full commission can approve it.
And just so you know, we can put out statements and, if it's a good idea, we do them periodically. With this, it's a little late, so a meeting, is a good time to put it out. It's in a sea of statements about it right now, so it may not have as much impact, but typically, we do put out statements relatively quickly. It doesn't have to go through a long deliberation. We can get those out of working with, whoever the point person is, if John, you become the statement person, we'll reach out to you as soon as I'm aware of something and say, hey, we gotta do a statement, let's start drafting and we'll get on it. So, yeah, so.
All right, for the sake of time and staying on the agenda, so we can all get home shortly. Two things I want us to consider as we think about moving forward. One is, when Alana comes back, we'll make a motion on whether or not we'll add any training into the agenda tomorrow. So everybody has a vote on that and we follow a fair process. Number two is, let's consider when we do trainings in public, maybe doing only the ones that are a half an hour. So we don't eat up the community's time with a training that they don't have to sit through. And block off our time for hours or more where we are together as a commission or as committees.
I would just like to say to that point, I understand the logic behind it, but I also keep thinking about the ways in which this commission can be different and the ways in which we can really hold ourselves to this issue of transparency. And my personal belief is that, when you think about how we want to shepherd in like a new era of civilian oversight, maybe part of that community engagement is having the training be more open. And I understand that people might not want to sit through that, but the transparency part I think is really important. So, I'm going to support what the committee wants, but I just want to put it out there that my stance on it is I actually think that there's actually long-term value in the citizens seeing as much of the training as possible.
Is the agenda for the meetings available to the public?
Yeah.
Yes, agendas are posted as soon as they're made. So yes, and then after the meeting, they're all posted. That's correct.
Okay, so maybe they can decide if they want to sit through, or they can decide when they want to come and pop in. And I think having the trainings at the beginning of the meeting would be good, so they can say, hey, from 6 to 7, we're gonna have training, but then you guys will come at 7.
And you guys did vote as the commission to have your public engagement at the front, so you would have to do an amendment to that. I think, because you made it an official act that all your agendas will have public comment at the front of the agenda.
And I don't know if you were there, sure you did read it. What you do? Okay.
I mean, I'll also add to that, I think, well, and again, from my recollection from orientation, one of the reasons why you guys put 2 meetings on the calendar a month is to get through training, right? And so there's that piece, and until you guys continue to figure out what your processes will be and how you're going to dive into the actual oversight piece, right? Your training is the commission's business.
And right now,
that's what your meetings are, is commission business.
right now you're looking at the 22nd. You've invited command staff. I think that will cover some of your training, because that'll be about police organization and structure, getting to, they could talk a little bit about what they do as the command staff. So that's one point on there. And then, we could make a recommendation, the committee can make that recommendation tomorrow to also include what Delonte already has slated, and you'll kill a lot of training in that February 22nd meeting with some planning, in this direction tonight.
Question, are there committee meetings happening next week?
Yes, so that's the other point that was asked is, what can we move to committee? I think that's a good idea. So like city budgeting and purchasing guidelines, I think it may be agreeable to move some of this to committee-specific training if they're dealing with that issue. So we can probably go more in detail with the budgeting committee on something like that if you didn't want to do, take that hour for the whole group. Because the question was, what in block 1 and block 2? Well, that could be via committee most possibly, since they're the ones doing that. In block 2, the CPC budget, I think we already have that covered because we went through it in detail at the committee training. And we can use those videos too. Remember, they're recorded.
No.
So we can use the videos of the committee trainings, and other committee members can watch that, if they, to cover that base as well.
And it might be a little tedious, but you might also want to track how and when those commissioner members are watching it, because I never want anybody to be accused of not going through the training. I mean, yeah. Even if it's just a sign in here at the office, they came in and watched it. And then that way, if somebody says, well, you never went through this training, we can say, yes, they did.
Grant making, we can do that as well. I'm fairly certain we can get, again, pull from collective training. There are city organizations that do grant making. Maybe we can reach out to one of them and have them just come in and talk about how they do that process. So that's another one that could probably go to the budget committee. So, yeah.
So I guess to clarify, because what I was really getting at by when I was asking about the meetings for next week is, I can't stress enough the concern that I have that there continues to be meetings without a presentation a formal presentation on the Open Meetings Act and public records. And so to know that there's going to be a full commission meeting tomorrow, another set of 3 or 4 committee meetings that are going to all happen before whenever it is that we can get a sunshine law training on the books, just as legal counsel, that concerns me.
Well,
To continue to do things and conduct business without having that piece in the schedule sooner rather than later.
and for the sake of our time, I wanted to get to that point, which was, can we make a vote tonight on a training for next week that would cover ethics and conflict of interest and sunshine law? Again, knowing that everybody cannot be here, is recorded training. So then that is when we start to implement the online or go back and watch kind of process, so that we can say at least that is covered and we can get as many commission members here as possible. Can we have a talk about that?
I agree. I was gonna ask if we could look at our schedule, at least for us that's in this room, and make it's a mandatory training. You either come next week to that day that we have it next week, or you come into the office and you sign. And we might not have to do that for all trainings, but because of how important those 2 trainings are, people need to come into the office and watch them for accountability. But if we can get our schedules to say, when are we available next week, then we could possibly be in. And then tomorrow we'll let them know, hey, we made a motion in committee. This is a required training. We have to do it ASAP. We're going to be here next week. When can you all make it? Do we want to do that now?
Oh,
Yeah.
Delonte, how many hours are we talking about for those 2 units?
Those were 3.
2.
2? Okay.
For both of those, you can do both of those in 2 hours?
I mean,
Yeah, so I can do the ethics piece in an hour. And then Amy from the law department should also be able to do sunshine laws within an hour as well.
You're looking at the week of the 13th to the 17th.
Do you have any preference, Delonte, in your schedule for next week? For a day and time since you'll be presenting?
the 14th,
Just-
Valentine's Day.
Just,
Well, yeah.
yeah,
think
and
we-
just
but-
I like Wednesday.
just a point, the rules committee wants to reconvene on the 13th, the evening of the 13th. So that leaves us the 14th, the 15th, or the 16th, most likely.
Nobody wants to meet on the 14th. We also can fill out if anybody's available. I don't either, but
Well,
Yeah.
the 15th, if it's good, but Delonte, the 15th is
The 15th.
a Wednesday.
So that's what I was gonna recommend. I mean,
Here we go.
generally speaking, y'all know the 15th will work for most, if not every commissioner, since that's gonna be your regular meetings.
See, like Wednesday is great.
okay,
Right.
so next Wednesday. Motion to have,
Well, let's decide on a time too, and then we, whole motion is, what would be the time that we would want to do it? Knowing that we need 2 hours.
This one, right?
Yes.
Today, 5 or 6.
well, can we do at least 5:30? Because I don't get off work till 5, that's why I might be late.
Well, let's do 6 so you can have a little more time. Okay.
Okay.
I mean, even 30 minutes goes by like that.
So
Okay.
we'll do 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Yeah.
And then somebody make the motion for Wednesday the 15th at 6 to 8 p.m.
I would like to present the motion for us to meet next week for training Wednesday, February 15th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
I'll second the motion.
All in-
Ayes?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, sorry.
That passes.
All right, so that passes, and we'll let them know tomorrow.
Just a point that's helpful for people watching, we've, in other committees, roll call is the best way to do votes. When we're broadcasting that way there, that people can hear, clearly who voted on which.
We can do roll call. All right, so we have a motion on the floor to have a mandatory training meeting on February 15th from 6 to 8, that's next Wednesday, on Ohio Board of Ethics, presented by Delonte Spencer, and then Ohio Sunshine Laws, presented by Amy, what's her name? Amy Huff.
Which I'm texting her now, by the way, make sure that actually.
Okay.
You go first.
Gotcha. From 6 to 8 next week. And we are gonna move to roll call. Robert's rules at all. Yeah, so roll call, Greg Reeves,
I mean,
I think,
Yes.
yes.
okay.
James Chura is absent, Sharina. Diane.
Yes.
John Adams,
Yes.
Kyle Early,
Yes.
and I'm Alana, and I say yes as well. And so tomorrow we'll let them know this is a mandatory training. We got one motion, okay?
And then, so what I think we do now is then we take this as a training, and then at our next training, then we can plan the next one and what we will cover in that training.
So you don't want to at least knock out the first 8 hours? Can we get the first 8-hour date on the books?
So maybe, would we have to present a motion that we meet have monthly 8-hour Saturday?
Well, we already decided we would do it. I think we can come up with, a date in March, because they needed a 30 days, a date in March that we want to do the 8-hour training. And we can come up with that.
Do we have to motion to present it to?
With this one, I would suggest you bring it up through conversation and get tomorrow when you do your committee presentation, and then ask for a motion tomorrow when you have a commitment from most people, because you can say, tonight, you're gonna do it on the 25th, and you don't know, how many people in the committee as a whole can do that. So that's just a suggestion. Either you can commit to a date tonight and then say, mandatory, from training, or you can just try and have that conversation tomorrow evening for a few minutes and get through it that way.
I would want us to have at least a couple dates.
I was gonna ask too, so how, people suggested that we, suggest organizations and people that we would like to train, can we discuss that via conversation as well, and just decide like what we want or submit those to you and then?
So the chairs can have that conversation during the presentation tomorrow, or solicit ideas. We don't have to make it a long conversation. You could just bring it up. Hey, we're looking for suggestions of training organizations or people we know in our networks to do training, and then have them send that to, the chairs here in email. So it'll save you time of having a long discussion tomorrow night about it. So,
Do we have any ideas of people right now that we can throw out to them tomorrow also to save time? So like we talked about Black Shield and the Hispanic Police organization. Do we have any few more that we can during our presentation say like, hey, these are who we're thinking of, organizations we're thinking of? Do we have any?
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely do that. What my thinking is, so we don't kind of just drag the meeting out tomorrow, is maybe we actually put together a training outline that we can present to the entire commission and have them vote on it that way. So what we can do is create some dates and times that we suggest, leave room for them to fill it in. Are there any presenters that you would like? They can give us their suggestions then. Then when we come back, that's what we put into the outline of what we want to do. Because my fear is that we just open that discussion up, it'll eat up a lot of time.
No, I mean, tonight, let's talk, like, have some
Even
ideas
tonight,
right now.
yeah. I mean, if you got ideas tonight, that's fine. But give us some time to think about it and come back as a committee and say, hey, these are my suggestions and recommendations. We create one document that we then share with the entire commission as a recommendation in our committee, from our committee.
And Jason, once we make those recommendations, would you have to vet those organizations or anything?
That's a good question. Good question.
Well, the first thing is if they want to be paid, it'll be harder because then we'd have to put it to bid and they would have to be competitive. So if there's another organization that does the same thing, they would have to have a fair opportunity to come in and present why they should be the person for that job. But if we're talking about pro bono donation of training, then, you know, I would just say, you guys would set the standard, you know, so you're saying, would you meet this? And we can give feedback on that, you know. I think everyone here knows the quality of some of these organizations, so I don't really think it'll be an issue, you know. Yeah, if they have the years in it and they do it frequently, you know, then I think that's what the criteria is. And also, just for point of clarification, are we doing that mandatory training, so is that an official committee meeting here of this committee? So we're saying,
Yes.
you know, this is our next training committee meeting and it will have mandatory training. Okay. So Delonte, question, when council has a committee meeting, right? And then, council people sit in on it, they're not officially part of that committee, but they're sitting in, right? So you're not in danger of, you know, anything there, right? You can do that. They're not voting on committee issues. So if the committee went to business afterwards and they wanted to stay, it's okay so long as they don't vote on the issues, right?
Correct. And as we were having this discussion, I was thinking about the exact same thing. So yeah, I mean, with the assumption that you're not going into committee business, and I guess if you have your committee set up, the people who are on the committee is who's on the committee. So regardless of kind of who else is there. So I don't think we have that issue.
So you can add a few things, a few minutes at the end of that training for some additional committee business, like setting your next meeting or just having a brief discussion. So I'll work with the chairs on the agenda in the meantime.
And just to make sure that 15th will be the trainings that you talked about, sunshine and ethics.
Yes. Okay. So we've gotten 2 trainings scheduled. We got some business accomplished. Let's clap it up for that.
And I was gonna make a motion to
Yeah.
add these other 4 things I talked about, so we know they can be on the calendar. That's it.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
So the 4 things that I talked about, I wanted to make a motion just to have those topics added to the training.
And for clarity, is that the media training, the transformative, restorative justice, and what were the?
And the
2 groups.
2 groups. And really, I don't know, but like the intro of those or meet and greet of those 2 diversity.
2 organizations. Yeah.
So I was just gonna make a motion just to add that to the thing.
Would they want to be paid for that?
The police associations, no, they'll come. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we can talk about like media, like the media training transformative research. It just depends on who does it.
Okay.
So it might be a paid organization.
Well, I was
It
just
might
talking
be-
about those 2 organizations, so that.
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
there,
okay. Okay.
So
but I just want to make a motion to add that to the training. And I can't make a motion. Thank you.
I would like to make a motion to add to the February 15th training.
No,
To the-
just added topics.
Let's add to our topics of trainings, a visit from the Black Shield and the Hoffa Group, media training protocol, internal communication system, and transformative and restorative justice.
Do we have a second?
I'll say.
And
Roll
going
call.
down roll call. Greg Reeves,
Yes.
James Sure is absent. Sharina Zayed,
Yes.
John Adams,
Yes.
Carl Early,
Yes.
and I'm Alana Gerhart saying yes.
All right. Any other thoughts or comments before we close out this meeting?
Do
So,
I was gonna ask, those 2 motions that we passed, do we give those to you to put for new business, or do we just say that tomorrow?
No, we have.
So I have to create minutes of each of these meetings, so they'll be in there and then, so it'll reflect it in the minutes that it was an official act.
But as, when we do our report on the meeting tomorrow, would maybe list those 2?
Yeah, you can report what you
Yeah,
did. Yeah, that's up to the chairs how they want to present what happened here. Yeah, yeah. And the minutes probably won't be done by tomorrow. They'll be done before the next meeting so you can approve them here of this group.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
so I just want to clarify, or just to ask rather, kind of what is your plan going forward with respect to the entire kind of training topic schedule.
So in terms of that, my suggestion to the committee was going to be, since we have the two most important scheduled, right? Next, committee meeting that we have, bring your ideas of what you would want those, I, items prioritized, and how you would want those to be, presented. Again, looking at what you have put together, what Jason has put together, I'm kind of in favor of following this, but allow the committee to say, hey, this is, more important than this to us, and then we take a vote on that and move forward with that. And so please, by the next meeting, please do your homework to see, if any of this needs to be moved, changed. We've made additions to it, where those additions will go so that we can have a working document and timeline to follow moving forward.
And we're also soliciting dates tomorrow for a possible time in March, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And I would just add from Jason in the line, say if you could also get to us by the next one, a definite on what trainings can be online so that when we are coming with our ideas, we know moving forward what can be online so we can schedule accordingly.
Okay.
I would
What?
also like to, I'm sorry,
No,
I would also like to make sure we take advantage of what we have on the commission and James and get some of his input on, him being law enforcement, maybe what should be first to last, or just his opinion.
I agree.
I think we gotta take advantage of what we have.
Absolutely. The minutes will be sent to him, since he couldn't be here today. And then in there, he'll know what to bring for next week as well.
The board office can probably reach out to him. Is that?
Yeah.
I think he's traveling. He didn't say, he just was said he can't make any meetings this week, so.
The only thing I would add is, I was having a correspondence with Jason and Adriana earlier today. The only thing I would, if we were to push up training, and I know that we want to keep it a little open and we can kind of decide, but I do want to maybe suggest, I know there's a budget and grants committee, but so maybe in terms of training, we could prioritize the grant making, considering that like that's a big part of what we're going to be doing. My understanding, and I'm just going off the top of my head, is that there's a deadline in April. Like as a commission, we have to like decide on like our processes or like, is that what you?
No, not for grant making. So you guys, Adriana asked, had reached out to me. She was playing with some ideas on it, and I had a suggested timeline for what we should do every year for awards and things like that. So don't worry about that yet, because it's just a suggestion, and that's for, she's working on something to present to the budget committee with you, and she'll reach out to you, I'm sure. So you must have talked to her, so,
Yeah,
but there isn't, the only deadline for budget is we have to have something to bring to council next week, and we don't have the
Oh.
day yet, so.
Next week.
Yes, and so that may change, the ability for me to be at a committee meeting, next week, because some of those things I've been at council at 8 at night. So they usually call it at a certain point, but we'll still get it moving here, so don't worry about that.
So what exactly has to be presented to council next week?
So we have to have, you guys have to approve a budget, right? So, and you only get one shot. Now, the reason it's different this year is because of the time you were seated. Normally, we would have that done like in the summer, and it would be good, and then we would wait until February before we had to go to council. But this time, because of the time we're seated, council does their appropriations next week, and it becomes official budget for the year. So we really don't have time to debate this year's budget as much as we would in future years, because we have to meet that council deadline of next week with the budget.
One thing to also think about, before you guys break is, if you are including any type of training for the full commission meeting on the 22nd, it's February 7th now, right? So, because this committee wouldn't meet again until what? the 21st.
No, the
Next week.
15th. 'Cause the training you're gonna do is a
Oh,
committee meeting, so
yeah,
they
yeah.
can address
And then
that
we would
after
address-
your training,
Right.
as a new business item, so they could set the training for the following week there.
So we.
If you guys, I mean, so if you've done, I guess if you, do some homework before then, because here's the thing too, right? If we're already consuming 2 hours worth of actually training, and then you're gonna talk business afterwards, and if you're not trying to be here for another however long after that, it just might be a good idea to already start to think about what you might want for the 22nd. Particularly because even if you decide on the 15th, that's still a matter of, right, because these are easy because we literally already, like, the PowerPoint's done, everything is literally already ready to go, because I've literally given this presentation, no less than 100 times since September. Amy's presentation is ready to go, but for something else that you might want, perhaps that presentation is not as ready to go and still needs to be developed and fleshed out. So you want to give whoever the presenter might be for that February 22nd training that time and leeway to be able to prepare.
And I have in my notes that you guys were interested in having the division leadership come that day. I think they can probably work in some of this training, for that 22nd meeting. I think that was in my notes, as you wanted to have the chief come and have, so I think that would count, as some of the division training, if we told them part of the goal is to knock some of this out in that conversation.
So you could do like I'm just looking at this CDP one, right, where you have like introduction, welcome, CDP structure and command.
Right.
And that covers kind of just that first piece there.
And if we're gonna go that route, we might want to suggest tomorrow that whoever's gonna be the next chair, maybe it should be from this committee. If we're gonna like take a bulk of the training, the time for training, then maybe one of us should suggest that we are the chair for the next meeting. And then that kind of will eliminate, because if it's not one of us and we're gonna suggest a bunch of training, it's gonna be a lot of back and forth between chairs and whoever's gonna be chairing the next full meeting.
Okay, that makes sense.
That would be my suggestion. I mean, I don't want to throw it on the chairs. But you guys are gonna be doing, and I don't want to throw it on you, but I mean, I don't know. I just would feel like it should be somebody from this group.
No, that's part of our responsibility, so.
So is it okay then, is that something that was correct in my notes, that if I reach out to them and
Yes.
say, can you hold this date, and hopefully there won't be any conflicts there, but usually they adjust to our full commission meeting schedules pretty well. And then I'll say, hey, we want to knock out a little bit of the structure and CDP basics, stuff in that. Are you guys okay with me planning that with division leadership?
I just would ask, because again, it don't take that long. That's only 30 minutes. And they're gonna be there for a whole hour. So I want them, if they're gonna do that, can they talk about the budgeting and hiring practice? Can they talk about
Yes.
these 3 things? That's an hour and a half. Can they talk about those 3 things on the 22nd?
Yes, I will tell them to knock out as much as they can in however a month's time. And whoever the chair pro tem is will determine that time. So, I'll work with them to, just like I work with every chair pro tem to craft that, to get as much as we can in that.
For your
time.
notes too, because I don't want to overlook what Delonte suggested, and it might be in there, the structure and command and the general policy overview as well.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
I'm
that's all
saying
there?
for this, it's only, he noted already that only takes a half an hour.
No, I got you.
And so I was saying, since all of these only take a half an hour,
And
can
cool.
they just hit all this whole little bottom half?
Yeah, that's what he was saying too, from this document, yes.
So and I think we can have the conversation to see if that can be done, but I do want to just make the distinction, right, that I guess what we're seeing in here, right, this is Jason's recommendation on what should be done, and then this is what they're saying they can do already. Now, we can go back and say, hey, we don't want you to follow this, we want you to, or you guys want them to do it in this way and see if they can accommodate that, but I'm just pointing out that, so they're essentially saying that introduction, welcome, CDP structure and command is an hour, not 30 minutes from their standpoint. But you can ask them for sure if they can cover that in 30 minutes and then use the other time or the rest of the time to cover other pieces for sure. But I just wanted that to be clear that at minimum, you should hold them to this because this is what they've already committed to. And if you want to ask them to change to look more like this, then yes, but don't look at this as the baseline because they didn't come up with this.
But it
Gotcha.
also says that those things, those 3 items that Alana suggested can be, online.
So, and that's my point. They didn't
Well,
say
that'll
that.
save, they didn't say that, but it'll save us some time if you have to go, if you choose to do the academy, we'll knock that out. But inviting them, it's a double win. We can, you know, you guys mentioned you want them to be introduced to you early. I think that's a great idea. But if they're coming, they might as well knock some of this out. So, you know, so I will work with them to get as much as they can in that 2 hours and allowing time for you guys to have a conversation with them and ask questions, because you're just gonna wanna ask questions, you know, so.
Also the topic, because they also said they only want to spend 30 minutes talking about their budget. And I feel like that their budget, that should be at least an hour conversation. So also in noting, like Kyle said earlier, even though I understand and being respectful of what they have come up with, also understanding what we need, we don't need an hour to do introductions and structure. We probably do need an hour for them to talk about budget. So I would just hope when Jason, you reach out to them, those 3 topics are hit and that we are able to have it be in an equitable way. Because I also just don't want to give so much deference to them that us as a committee do not give what we need. Because I know for a fact we're going to have more questions and need more time than 30 minutes to talk about the budget, but that's probably uncomfortable for them, which is why they only put 30 minutes for the budget.
And which is a $217 billion budget.
And so when you talk about an hour for introduction, I don't need an hour to know who you are. I need an hour to talk about money. So I would just hope that we can also expand that and understanding that we're giving deference to them, but we also need deference back.
Right.
And I think some of this too is also kind of goes back to the point of, you know, what we were tasked to do from the monitoring team by actually getting descriptions of what these things could include, right? So for example, we have no idea what they would consider to be inclusive of structure and command, right? Perhaps there is a laundry list of other things that go beyond just like, hey, here's our organizational chart, right? Because I get your point that like, we don't need a bunch of time to say, hey, here's our org chart and here's how we're set up. Maybe their interpretation of this includes a lot more than that. So, and that's information we have to get anyway per the monitoring team. You know, so that can also assist in figuring out kind of the timetable of what that includes. But I think also the conversation, I think your point is well taken, that how much can you get in this 2 hours with respect to the things that you guys want to know more about?
And it'll shave, regardless, it'll shave time off that bigger, those academy days or whatever they want to do, however we decide to do it. So you're gaining it no matter what. So we'll get there.
Because I also had a question, if you have to go before council soon, especially with the grant making, and I know some of their budget we got as far as grant making, that was another reason why. Do we need to prioritize understanding their budget since we have to go through that grant making process so soon?
Well, your grant making is, you have $1 million and some change, right? That's your discretionary grant making, so it has nothing to do with the police budget, other than the fact that it's tied to it. So the police are decreasing their budget a little bit this year, so the grant money went down a little bit, but it's a 0.5%, whatever their budget is, that's what you guys get every year. So that's in the law, it's not negotiable, we don't have to go argue that before council, it just isn't automatic, so.
Well,
Did we
thinking,
make a motion about the 22nd meeting?
I thought didn't we vote on that already?
We only voted on
Oh,
the
the
15th
15th,
and
yeah.
adding topics.
And I'm not that sure you have to, because we talked about the chair pro tem and working with them to do it, so if you want to skip that part, you
We're trying to
can.
make that motion.
Okay.
I'll move that we adjourn this meeting.
Amen.
I second that motion to adjourn the meeting.
Call the roll.
Roll call. Gregory Reeves,
Yes.
James Kerr is absent. Sharina Zayed,
Yes.
John Adams,
Yes.
Kyle Early,
Yes.
and myself, Alana Garrett Ferguson, yes.
This meeting is adjourned.
Great job, everybody, that was a great.
Yeah.